Welcome everyone for the second lecture on data warehousing and data mining. So AKTU subject code is KOE093. So if you remember in the last lecture, we discussed about the basic definition of data warehouse and what are the different properties of data warehouse. So it is subject oriented, it is integrated, it is time variant. Okay. So these were the different properties of data warehouse. So in today's lecture, we'll be discussing the fundamental differences between database and data warehouse. So in the last lecture also, I have told about database is also known as OLTP. So that is online transactional processing. So in case of database, our main objective is transactions, right? But in case of data warehouse, it is also known as OLAP. So that is online analytical processing. So in case of data warehouse, the basic objective is to analyze, right? How to get the knowledge from the data that we are having, and it contains the historical data. So one by one, we'll discuss each and every point, each and every difference between database and data warehouse. So these are the different parameters on which we'll be differentiating between OLTP and OLAP, right? So first difference is on the basis of users, right? So if we talk about database, the typical users of databases are clerk and IT professionals who do the query on the database, and they get the required results, right? They may also perform other operations like insert, delete, etc. Okay. If we talk about data warehouse or lab, so the typical users are knowledge workers who are actually, who are actually looking for the knowledge out of the data, and that knowledge they'll be using for making intelligent decisions. Then the second point is function. So what is the function of databases? So databases are basically used for day-to-day operations, for day-to-day maintenance of data, right? But if we talk about data warehouse, then its main function is to support the decision making process, right? So it is used for decision support. Then if we talk about how the databases are designed and how the design is different from data warehouses. So databases are actually application oriented, right? So they are actually, they are actually designed around some sort of application. But if we talk about OLAP, so this is one of the property of data warehouse that is subject oriented. So data is actually maintained around different subjects. Okay, and we'll be accessing the data on the basis of our requirement around a particular subject. Then if we talk about what kind of data is stored in databases, so generally they have current data, right? Current data which has to be up to date. Then if we talk about data warehouse, then they generally have historical data, and typically the data is around of last 5 to 10 years. It has to be summarized. Okay. Then it should be multidimensional. So it should be, it should be organized around multiple dimensions. It is integrated. Collected from various heterogeneous sources, and it has to be consolidated. So this is the whole theme of storing the data in the data warehouse. Then if we talk about the usage, so usage of data that is stored in the databases, it is of repetitive usage, right? Repetitively it is being used by the IT professionals and colors who actually need the data. Then usage of data warehouse is actually ad hoc. So obviously it depends on the kind of requirement, it depends on the kind of decision making that we want to perform. If we talk about the access, so generally it is read write operations on the database. But in case of data warehouse, there are a lot of scans, and we actually get the data. We get the required data, required historical data, basically. Okay. Unit of work is, in case of databases, it is short and simple transactions, but in case of data warehouse, it is being accessed with the help of complex queries. And obviously, these queries would be generated by some sort of data mining systems. Okay. Then how many records that we generally access in case of databases? So tens or hundreds of records generally we access in case of database. But when we talk about data warehouse, we generally access millions of records, right? Because it is having a lot of data, a huge volume of data is being stored in the data warehouse, right? It is having historical data. What are the typical number of users of database? So it generally have thousands of users, but very few users would be there of data warehouse, because only knowledge worker, only those people who are actually dealing with generation of knowledge from the data, they will be dealing with data warehouse. Then if we talk about database sizes, then typically the database, in case of database, the size is around from 100 MB to few GBs, right? But if we talk about data warehouse, the size is actually that generally varies between 100 of GBs to even TBs, right? And it may be more than TBs also. Okay. Then if we talk about the different metrics, so in case of database, transaction throughput will be one of the metric, and in case of data warehouse, response time and the query throughput, these will be the metrics that will be using to measure the overall performance of the data warehouse. So these are the fundamental differences between database and data warehouse. Now the obvious question is why we should maintain a separate data warehouse, why we cannot just go with the database, right? So obviously, we should have a high performance for both the systems, for database as well as for data warehouse. So generally, database is tuned for OLTP, for transaction processing. It is being tuned, right? Different access methods are there, indexing is there, concurrency control is there, recovery is there. So all these properties are actually uh, being maintained, being uh, uh, dealt with in case of databases, right? But in case of data warehouse, it is actually tuned for analytical part, analytical processing, and it generally have complex OLAP queries. Then multi-dimensional view of the data should be there, and consolidation of data should be there from the various different heterogeneous sources, right? Then if we talk about the different functions and different data, if we talk about missing data, then decision support actually require historical data, right? But in case of databases, we do not have historical data. Okay? Data consolidation, data warehouses actually requires consolidation. We need to do aggregation, summarization of data from different heterogeneous sources. If we talk about the data quality, so different sources typically use inconsistent data. So in case of, as we have discussed in the last class also, when we were talking about the integration of data from various sources, so they generally have different structures, right? Different source would have different structure. So that then there may be some sort of inconsistency in the data also, right? There may be different codes and formats, but they have to be reconciled in case of data warehouse. Then only we can use some sort of data mining techniques to get the knowledge out of that data. Okay. So these are the fundamental differences between databases and data warehouses. I hope these differences are clear to everyone. Okay. So in the further lectures, we'll be looking at how to design a database, how to design a data warehouse, right? What are the different components of data warehouse? So we'll be looking in further lectures. Thank you.